Okay, hello. Today we are going to be talking about oxygen and all of its functions and whatnot. My name is Samantha.
I'm Luis.
And I'm Sham.
We want to start off with the question of what is oxygen? Oxygen is the most abundant element on Earth's crust, and the Earth's surface is composed of the crust, atmosphere, and hydrosphere, which all contain oxygen in different ways. Okay, so as you can see in this picture, it shows the Earth's crust composition and all of the elements that are there, with oxygen being 46% at the highest percentage with all of the elements in the crust. So where is it found on Earth? Like I said, it's found in the crust, the atmosphere, and the hydrosphere. 89% of water by mass consists of combined oxygen, including carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen. And humans need oxygen to breathe, and we have oxygen in our blood. And then when we go on with the process of respiration, we take in oxygen and we produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct, whereas plants produce oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis, which in that process, they're going to be using the carbon dioxide that we produce as their reactant in photosynthesis, and they're going to be producing oxygen as their byproduct in that reaction. Okay, so as you can see here on the right, we have a picture depicting the oxygen cycle, which basically has a little simple explanation of how oxygen is recycled within our environment and within our water system as well. And then the major chemistry of oxygen. So oxygen is found to be part of three common chemical processes. Combustion, where oxygen is utilized as a reactant in combustion reactions, and O2 is a highly flammable gas. And then respiration, which happens on a cellular and a molecular level with cell respiration and lungs using oxygen to replenish red blood cells, with fresh oxygen to take to other cell systems in the body. So with this, basically, our lungs go through respiration, which replenishes, like I said, our red blood cells with oxygen molecules, which then that blood goes through your veins into other organs in your body, and it uses the oxygen in the red blood cells to oxygenate the other organs. And then once it's out of oxygen, it goes back into the lungs and it gets replenished again. And then with photosynthesis, plant cells respire through photosynthesis and use CO2 from the environment to produce O2 or oxygen as a byproduct, which is the oxygen that we. Okay, so on the left here, we have an image of a visual representation of combustion, which is basically going to show us a simple reaction with all of the different molecules and elements that affect that and how they go together in the products and reactants, and how oxygen is used in that reaction. And then on the right, we have a diagram that depicts both photosynthesis and respiration. So as we can see, the sun gives energy to the plants, which allows it to proceed with the process of photosynthesis, which produces oxygen that we breathe, and then which goes into our lungs and into our blood system, and the oxygen is placed inside of the red blood cells, which travels to all the different organs in our body, and then it's recycled back into our lungs, and then we breathe out the carbon dioxide, which is left inside of the red blood cells, that then the plants use again to as part of their process of photosynthesis.
So some of the major implications and some of its big impacts on society that we have is that we know that since oxygen created what Earth is right now, we wouldn't have the presence of an ozone layer. and we wouldn't have all the plants and trees we would see every day, essentially. So this is just because oxygen wants to react with almost any compound every element on the periodic table. So because of the electronegativity of the element, since it has 6 valence electrons, as we can see from our periodic table, oxygen wants to pull electrons from other elements to have a complete shell. So over here I have an example of H2O. As we see, oxygen has 6 valence electrons and hydrogen having 1. So oxygen is now pulling these electrons in so it can fulfill that shell. So some of the basic everyday life importance, as we know, is we need oxygen to breathe. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Understanding how the environment uses oxygen and how it's affected and, you know, how we use it will help us better understand what we can do in the future to keep our air clean. So some of the uses that I've included here is we have our environmental use, which is oxygen is used to create glucose, which is basically a plant food. And as we can see, that oxygen is a byproduct of from photosynthesis, as we can see from this picture over here. And then the human use, or what we use it for, that our blood cells like to transport oxygen around the human body, and it can be used for multiple purposes. Over here I have an example of what oxygen transport kind of looks like. We have our oxygen from the lungs entering the red blood cell. The red blood cells travel through the body, and then the oxygen is get released to the cells. And so here are some of the good effects and bad effects of either having the right amount of oxygen or too much of oxygen in general. So having the right amount of oxygen is important because it allows us to continue to live healthy lives. Things like oxygen tanks allow us to provide ourselves with extra oxygen when we are short of breath or our lungs are compromised. And this allows us to be able to work on major health issues that people have without having to worry about them not being able to breathe. So oxygen is very good. We use it every day. And so, yeah, some of the downsides of having too much oxygen in our bodies, though, is harmful to us because it creates free radicals. These atoms look for other electrons to pair up with, and when this happens, it can cause damage to your body and your DNA. So that's just an example of just having way too much oxygen in the body, and so it is unhealthy for you in the long run.
So oxygen minimalizes the environmental impact in the sense that, you know, we create new technologies to benefit the world with utilizing oxygen. For example, plants, when we create more pure oxygen, we're able to improve the process of photosynthesis. We're able to reduce our carbon footprint through improving our use of oxygen and minimize carbon dioxide exposure, which, as the photo shows, in a country like India, where in a lot of Asia, where smog is very much apparent, you know, it's important to minimize all the CO2 exposure, and it'll help regulate higher populations too. So what are we improving on? In our society, we are improving on by planting more trees. We create oxygen generators, as shown on the right. We're able to create pure oxygen from just nothing, from just compressed air. And some substitutes for oxygen have been found, so we use less oxygen when we're burning fossil fuels, which creates less carbon dioxide. And in terms of medical improvements, we have the oxygen generator. Our future outlooks. So since, as we said earlier, you know, oxygen is not scarce at all. So there are many different directions people have taken to utilize oxygen for the future. So artificial creation of compounds and pure oxygen has been noticed from the pure oxygen generator. And a lot of scientists have focused their oxygen improvements on plant growth. So photosynthesis grows to create better plants. The photo, however, is a less serious utilization of oxygen, in that it is supposed to replace energy drinks where you inhale this oxygen and you're supposed to have a better stamina. And so our real life inorganic examples, I mean, carbon dioxide is one of the most known inorganic example we could have used. So carbon dioxide emissions are important and, affects our pollution, it affects the environment. And of course, we produce it when we exhale, and plants produce it through photosynthesis. And one of the cool examples that I found for oxygen's inorganic examples is acid rain. As you can see through the plants, they send harmful oxygen compounds into the air, and then it releases a specific oxygen compound back down as so-called acid rain.
These are our sources. Thank you so much for paying attention. So yeah.
And we hope you learned some stuff about oxygen.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay. All right.